Welcome everyone to the Yissilmissil Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissil, and welcome back to the Bermuda Triangle Deep Dive series, only on Yissilmissil Productions channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that little button on the bottom. And also, make sure to like this stream. It helps with the algorithms, and it makes me feel better, you know? I hope you all have had a great past 2 weeks. I think that's how long it's been since we've done one of these. We're going to jump right back in to Gian J. Quasar's Into the Bermuda Triangle. We have chapter 11 today to go and just rip right through. I believe we are going to be here a little under 2 hours. So if you need to grab some food, you need to get a drink, get all that prepped. If you're watching this after the fact, hit pause, get yourself something to enjoy. Come back here and listen to me go into all the details of the Bermuda Triangle. Now, we do have multiple books after this one that we're going to be looking into. And I do have a Great Lakes Triangle deep dive series that is currently exclusive to members of the channel. So eventually that will be made public to everyone, but it's a little experiment for me to see how I can do things a little differently around here. Plus, memberships and super chats help move this channel along. I do invest time and money into procuring these books to read for your pleasure. And I do hope that you learn something from watching my videos, because I know I am. And this topic interests me greatly. I do have another deep dive series covering Coral Castle. And right now we're looking into the energy grid, magnetics, sound, things that, people get unalived for. But we're going for it here. And right now we're such a small channel. We just broke 2,100 subs. So thank you everybody for helping me achieve that. But today we are continuing the deep dive series of the Bermuda Triangle. Again, if you are reading along, we are on chapter 11 today. So let me get the music started in the slideshow, and we will get going. I did have a very good vacation. I went to Massachusetts with my uncle. We watched some pro wrestling. TNA Bound for Glory. On the way back on Tuesday, we stopped at Antietam Battlefield in Sharpsburg, Maryland. A very special place for me as a Civil War reenactor. The 114th Pennsylvania Zouaves that I portray, one of many units that I portray, they participated in the Battle of Antietam. They fell in with the 2nd Massachusetts in Miller's Cornfield. So that was a very special time for me, being there with my uncle and just soaking up the history there. As you can tell, I love history. So I'm trying to seek out the truth of it all. I do look at both sides of the war, and I do it all objectively, you see. Some days I have bad things to say about Lincoln and Burnside. Other days I have things to praise. So I look at everything thoroughly. But I did make a Facebook post with me in my full uniform at Antietam. If you're friends with me on Facebook, and even if you're not friends with me, I have it public for everybody to see. I posted 5 photos that my uncle took. He's a very natural photographer. It's not his profession, but he does a really good job. So Anyways, I'm back home now. We all got home safely, and I'm back at it here. We're doing this a little later than usual because I am doing other work outside all day long from dawn till dusk. And I'm going door to door talking to people. So, no, I'm not selling couches or insurance or anything like that. I'm gathering signatures for political candidates. And yeah, if journalist Tom Robb, if you're watching, you're not getting a call back from me. I'm sorry. You tried to burn me down the past 8 years. So you can be left hanging. I don't like to feed into people who like to bury others. If you were more objective as a journalist, maybe I would be inclined to talk to you. But you're very biased. And you don't get the privilege of speaking to me. Like a friend of... I don't even know why you have my number, actually. Like, why you still have it. All you want to do is bury me. So, yeah, you're not getting a call back. You get to find out with the rest of the world what I'm up to. And, alright, enough of that. Let's get some of this music going. So, we have Chapter 11 to cover today. It's titled, Let the Oceans Speak. We have about 18 pages. Yeah, 18 pages to cover today. So let me level this audio down so I'm not drowned out here. There we go. Oh, and I can't forget. We have the slideshow of the Illuminati that discovered a road on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean near Bermuda. Just says that we have past civilizations that are now underwater. So if you want to learn more about that, I did cover the Illuminati in other parts of this series. We're in part 26 today. So if you haven't watched everything, I suggest you do so you can get caught up. But if you're here for the first time, welcome. And I hope this piques your interest. Let's get started. The ratio of this planet, that is water, is nearly 3/4 of its surface, or about 170 million square miles versus 60 million square miles of land. Any consideration of an answer for the many disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle, as well as what appear to be escapes from unusual phenomena within it, cannot omit the ocean itself, the one tangible thread that runs throughout the litany of all these incidents. It is certain that nowhere else in the world over land does anything comparable to the events in the Bermuda Triangle take place. To consider why so many phenomena reported in the Bermuda Triangle are all seemingly tied to electromagnetism field effects, or EM for short. We cannot overlook its most important element, water. Water is an essential conductor of electrical charges. We may note mentally that this planet operates on electromagnetism, but we often forget the crucial role of water in electricity and thus on electromagnetism. Water is, scientifically speaking, merely the compound H2O, or 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. Sharing the ocean's chemical base are minerals of varying concentration, primarily sodium or salt, calcium, magnesium, and conductors of electrical currents like the metals copper and mercury. Erosion from the land and sea sediments account for some of these. Now, we've also focused on this in earlier parts of, I think the other, I don't know which book it was from. It might have been from earlier in this book that we're reading, but the waters in the river that exit into the ocean, they bring minerals into the ocean, and then after so many different chemical reactions in the ocean, you get mercury. So there's naturally occurring mercury in the ocean that can account for picking up radio waves that could explain the voices that some of these sailors on ships are hearing. You know, like the sirens, the mermaids, voices telling them to jump in, join us, that spooky stuff. I could comfortably say some of it is accounted toward high levels of mercury in certain parts of the ocean that occur naturally. Erosion from the land and sea sediments account for some of these. So that's what Quasar is saying here. The atmosphere is not as dense molecularly as this, quote, hydrosphere, end quote, but it is just as complex, and its balance is far more crucial to maintain the orderly recycling that takes place between the sea and the sky. Besides H2O, other elements exist in the atmosphere by ratio. Molecular nitrogen, N2, molecular oxygen, O2, carbon dioxide, CO2, argon, Ar, and in smaller amounts, methane, CH4, nitrous oxide, N2O, carbon monoxide, CO, hydrogen, H2, ozone, O3, and helium, He, neon, Ne, krypton, Kr, and xenon, Xe. To illustrate how these gases are not just air, it is estimated that 1 part per million of atmospheric CO2 equals 2.13 gigatons of carbon. That is 2.13 billion tons. As can be imagined, in excess of any particular one of these elements could be potentially harmful, as an element absorbed into the ocean or perhaps in the atmosphere itself, by altering the chemical makeup of the atmosphere and therefore creating an upset in the delicate processes that occur between ocean and atmosphere. These are, however, kept in a fairly steady ratio because of a complex recycling of them by the Earth, primarily over the ocean. But the burning of fossil fuels is a comparatively recent process, one that has existed in major degrees, first with coal and then with oil, only within the last 2 centuries. A brief span compared to the age of the Earth and mankind. Every 5 years, about 6.2 gigatons of carbon are added to the atmosphere through fossil fuel burning. For example, burning 1 gallon of gasoline yields 19.6 pounds of carbon. Roughly 92 gigatons are absorbed into the oceans during this same 5 years from the atmosphere. Of this, 90 or so gigatons re-enter the atmosphere. Much of this is natural recycled carbon, from erosion, deterioration, and even human breathing. But there is a difference between recycling carbon and adding it. The burning of fossil fuels is not a natural event, and it adds billions of tons of carbon to the equation every decade. And this has now been ongoing for 200 years. We may suppose that if any undesirable change is going to be triggered by a chemical imbalance, it would first appear over the oceans, where the greatest amount of carbon is absorbed, stored, and prepared for recycling back into the atmosphere. This theory is intriguing because it proposes that we ourselves are slowly orchestrating these events and phenomena. This may explain why they have not been reported before, or at least as frequently until now, inasmuch as they may not have been possible until the present chemical makeup of the atmosphere and oceans. An airplane or ship at the right moment may even be the deciding factor in setting off these electromagnetic phenomena. One recalls how fogs have attached themselves to an airplane or ship. One reason for this may be that airplanes and modern vessels are metal and perhaps attract any unusual electrical phenomena to them or create the friction necessary to generate them. Developing this theory more may also provide a very good explanation, for why many UFOs appear over the oceans and behave with apparent indifference. It could be that they are nothing more than strange atmospheric or electromagnetic phenomena materialized over the ocean at the right temperatures. Winds and humidity, a combination for which the tropical Bermuda Triangle may be ideal. We must remember that UFOs are mostly identified as blue-green or white-orange lights. These colors are so often seen in the Bahamas and the Gulf Stream waters that they are frequently pointed out to tourists. These greenish, quote, pools, end quote, of phosphorescence are caused by a number of things, not least of which are algae growth, marl, that's spelled M-A-R-L, and often plain, unidentified luminescence. Some dance and flit about underneath and then disappear or zoom away. In many ways, this is starkly suggestive of atmospheric ball lightning, though implying an underwater version of it. It seems clear that the humid and often volatile atmosphere of the triangle is equally capable of creating numerous lights and glows, or possibly even reflecting some of those from the water in the heavy haze, areas of visible humidity, to which the area is particularly prone. At night, they could be clearly identified as speeding lights. Vivid descriptions of UFOs as saucers might rule out the supposition that all UFOs are some sort of electrical phenomena, except where the phenomena is said to be an ovoid or saucer-shaped glow. On the other hand, UFOs might still be atmospheric even when the clear shape of a saucer or disk is reported. One remembers that in the Hutchison effect, odd multicolored lights and, quote, objects with a cling of gray fog, end quote, materialized during high voltage tests. The potential electrical power in the atmosphere, especially powerful in humid weather, could be astounding. One should not be surprised that places like the Triangle could produce extraordinary lights and even, under unusual circumstances, the appearance of, quote, objects. And that's ended with a question mark. So, laboratory discoveries of this last manifestation have some interesting applications when interpreting unusual aerial phenomena. We must remember that water, as well as many other materials, is capable of assuming three major states: liquid, solid, gaseous. It is logical to postulate that under the right conditions, other gases of the atmosphere are capable of solidifying and appearing as objects. Is it logical? Is it logical to postulate that under the right conditions, other gases of the atmosphere are capable of solidifying and appearing as objects? If so, they would, of course, be aerodynamic in shape, as they form in the currents or begin to fall when first solidifying, before assuming their gaseous state again. In this context, we should note that many UFOs are, curiously, described as small. Precise measurements have indicated 2 feet or smaller. Powerful forces disturbing the magnetic field might be the trigger. Unexplained objects like those noted above were seen during some of the heaviest aerial bombing over Germany during World War II, and often labeled as, quote, Foo Fighters, end quote. A clear description of them, however, as contained the records of the 8th Air Force, Mission 115, in parentheses, the Schweinfurt bombing on the 14th of October 1943, end parentheses, confirms their size as minuscule. This report details that clusters of silver disks were reported in the path of the 384th Formation and seen by bombardiers, turret gunners, and pilots alike. They were no bigger than 1 inch thick and 3 inches in diameter. In the words of one pilot attempting to evade them, quote, "My right wing went directly through a cluster with absolutely no effect on engines or plane surface," end quote. Further questioning of several air crews after they returned to base in England led to no explanations whatsoever for what these discs were. From another pilot, quote, "Also observed 2 other aircraft flying through silver discs with no apparent damage. Observed discs and debris 2 other times, but could not determine where it came from," end quote. This, quote, "debris," end quote, is remarkable for its proximity to the cluster of discs. It clung near them much like the gray fog seen in the Hutchison effect during high-voltage electricity tests. The records of many groups, both before and after the devastating Schweinfurt mission, confirm these same type of silver discs were seen during the heaviest bombing and anti-aircraft fire. These were never explained, but remain, as noted in a memorandum, in the files of U.S. Air Force history. Quote, "One of the most baffling incidents of World War II, and an enigma which to this day defies all explanation," end quote. But suppose, and always suppose, a concentration of atmospheric gases could briefly solidify harmlessly under the incredible electromagnetic stress of anti-aircraft bombardment. This seems astounding, but no less astounding than H2O in the atmosphere changing into ice merely by a change in temperature. I'm going to take a pause here real quick. And we got 4 different etchings, photographs. I think they're overhead sketchings of maps. Yeah. So that'll be interesting to look at. In attempting to minimize the Bermuda Triangle enigma, some have casually pointed out that unexplained disappearances have happened in the Atlantic hundreds or thousands of miles from the triangle. And naturally, with such an attitude, they rhetorically add, quote, "Why not consider the entire sea as the mystery zone?" End quote. This is something to which Dr. Ivan Lima might agree, though without the sarcasm. He experienced something, quote, triangle-esque, end quote, though far from the Bermuda Triangle. It was October 8th, 1995, when he and 7 other members of a research team were on a scientific cruise in the Pacific, off California. I got Carolina on my mind. A trained and qualified electrical engineer and a specialist in the magnetic field, he was partaking in the cruise in that capacity, with other members aboard being of the medical sciences. And I need to take another pause. I need some water. It's been a long day for me. I've been walking around all day. And I have an obscene amount of caffeine in me right now, so please pardon me. I don't like reading and getting lightheaded, so gotta take care of myself, you know. Alright, continuing on. According to Dr. Lima, they were about 50 miles off San Francisco Bay. After they had just thrown their anchor, they noted a radiation manifestation 50 feet from the vessel. Aware that solar radiation cannot produce such an effect in water, in parentheses, especially before 10 a.m., at such a short distance, end parentheses, they all began to take a keen interest. What happened next is so startling, it should be reported in Dr. Lima's own words. And here's an excerpt here that we're going to read. I'll be honest, I'm feeling a little woozy tonight. It usually does not happen, but I've been up all day, so my apologies, guys. All right. The following moment, the formation of a fog began exactly from the point of the radiation. The fog was low and thick, not more than a meter above the water, and it formed as a rectangular platform next to the extremity of that platform, which was almost in the direction of the ship. It began to grow upward, and its size arose. It started to expand laterally until it reached an approached height of 100 feet long, and it stabilized its oval general structure. Then at the last moment, that gigantic and well-structured formation of clouds, in parentheses, at least that is what it seemed, end parentheses, began to rotate clockwise. And at the same time, it showed signs of forming a spiral from the extremity to the center of the formation. In no moment, the weather changed. The sky was completely blue, cloudless, windless, and without any sound. And that's the end of the excerpt. Dr. Lima recalled that the formation had an enormously hypnotic effect on them. But like other members of the team, he felt an urgent need to leave when seeing the, quote, cloud, end quote, take on its spiral formation. When they reached the dock in San Francisco, they still noticed disturbing side effects of radiation, like nausea and dizziness, even though it was hours later. Lima has dubbed this manifestation as gate phenomenon because, quote, at the last moment, we all had the same impression that the center of that moving formation would open up as a gate and it literally would gobble our ship, end quote. While the others have fought to forget the experience, Dr. Lima has continued to study it from the point of view of electrical engineering and physics. He notes that the Earth acts as an enormous electric circuit and that the atmosphere is a weak driver. The greatest potential for effects, he believes, is in the cavity between the sea surface and the ionosphere about 35 miles up. His studies have convinced him that, quote, the electromagnetic waves identified as existent resonance in this cavity are not caused by an internal activity in the globe or surface. They are related to electric activity in the atmosphere and chemical properties of the ocean and its platform, not yet identified, particularly during times of intense ray activity in any part and moment of the terrestrial globe, end quote. He has come to the conclusion that the gate phenomenon is directly related to this cavity and is created by the introduction of radiation into the atmosphere and by chemical transformations that develop as a result among the millions of chemical processes generated by the ocean and its surface. Noting the relationship of time to gravity and electromagnetism, he speculates that this phenomenon, quote, may explain many ship and aircraft disappearances over the oceans in the last century, end quote, as it may act as, quote, a teleportation to nowhere or time travel event, end quote. Dr. Lima's theory provides a fascinating, though certainly not conventional, natural explanation for the fogs and vapors in the triangle, as well as why electromagnetic anomalies might be noted before or when near the epicenter of such an event. The theory may also be considered an adjunct to the theories touched on in Chapter 6. The Bermuda Triangle might one day prove his theory, plus the potential of electromagnetism in time travel theories. As this book goes to press, he is currently aboard the research vessel Emily, conducting the first part of his project to map these electromagnetic areas worldwide, with special emphasis to the, quote, ill-famed Bermuda Triangle, end quote. Dr. Lima is not the only observer who has likened the unusual spiral or, quote, electronic, end quote, clouds to a doorway, implying for now a figure of speech, although in the case of the many planes and ships missing in the Bermuda Triangle, one is tempted to imagine this doorway to be a literal one in which planes and ships are destroyed or sent into another dimension. One cannot help but to recall the strange case of Peter Jensen's disappearance, in which he reported he was disoriented in clouds at an altitude of only 100 feet off Miami, although the weather was perfect. In his case, 11 hours after his disappearance, long after fuel starvation, he calmly reported himself about 600 miles away, and yet no trace was ultimately found of him anywhere Bruce Gernon's experience may be worth re-examination in light of this evidence. His lenticular cloud first formed low over the ocean at about 500 feet altitude, and then suddenly expanded into the peculiar shape of a huge donut. And then from this, a spiraling tunnel opened up. Sounds like a portal to me. All of this indicates yet again peculiar electromagnetic properties arising from the ocean. A search of scientific literature has turned up an eyewitness account of another donut-shaped cloud, the only other time one has been recorded. This was on March 1st, 1965, over South Sea, England. It too was undergoing surprising vortex kinesis. The Royal Meteorological Society publication Weather contains the witness's description. Quote, flat base cumulus clouds formed in almost perfect circle of some miles in diameter, the whole formation resembling a ringed donut, as the center was devoid of clouds. In the central area, air appeared to be circulating in a clockwise direction, indicated by small wisps, which had detached themselves from the inside of the circle. End quote. Walter Nemanischen, that's spelled Nemanischen, a Canadian engineer, prospector, and geologist, or geophysicist, whose work also includes confidential government consulting on atmospherics, suggests that upper atmosphere electrodynamics may be the best explanation. He speculates that this could also explain why electronic aberrations seem to go hand in hand with the swirling clouds and fogs in the Bermuda Triangle. What may make these phenomena more frequent in the triangle, intensify their effect, or allow them to occur at much lower altitudes where they have been more consistently observed, can be implied by some very interesting theorizing. He offers that one could be highly radioactive radon gas emanating from the seabed because of the disintegration of extremely high-grade uranium deposits in underlying geological formations. This could ionize a column of air and therefore make it electrically conductive. He observes, quote, the greatly increased electrical conductivity of the air would explain certain other mysterious effects, like electrical equipment failing and engines sputtering and even dying. Coronal arcing would occur in piston-driven engines without electrically shielded high-tension wiring. End quote. He recalls that one isolated farm in the uranium-rich areas of northern Saskatchewan in Canada is situated over only a low-grade uranium deposit, but nevertheless still had, quote, an inordinate number of lightning strikes, end quote. In examining Paul Vance's sighting, he noted the very coincidental fact that the unusual swirling vapor was in a vertical column and that Vance's engine began to sputter at the same time, an indication of coronal arcing. The behavior of the light, however, remains obscure. An indication this could have a bearing on Bruce Gernon's experience comes from the extraordinary photograph his wife, Lynn, took April 26, 1999, in almost the precise area where his meteorological formation began off Andros in 1970. Their attention was drawn to the area because the, quote, glowing, end quote, or, quote, white waters, end quote, of the Bahamas were venting up in an exotic pattern. This blotch revealed a circular, clear area of undisturbed water in the center, into which the phosphorescence could not intrude, thus outlining what would otherwise be a completely invisible circle of water. Again, such a phenomenon seems to suggest something either radioactive or electromagnetic below. Regarding another possible explanation for the electromagnetic peculiarities of the triangle, Namanishin further comments, and here's an excerpt of him explaining this. I would not rule out high energy particles, in parentheses, from the solar wind, end parentheses, as a possible cause of some of the phenomena. In addition to the massive magnetic disturbances, they could also ionize the upper atmosphere. Little is still known about the effects these particles create in the stratosphere because of the paucity of electrical data. And that word is spelled Paucity. But if the interplanetary magnetic field is south during a massive coronal ejection, the extreme energy particles would not be deflected by the magnetosphere and consequently broadside the Bermuda Triangle region. That's the end of the excerpt. It is intriguing to consider a combination of the above as an explanation for the triangle's phenomenon of sudden engine failure and its possible role in having caused some of the disturbances. Sudden, unexplained power loss does happen to many aircraft along the same routes over the Bahamas, where so many have appeared, except in these cases, there is evidence that it happened or someone survived. Hey Andreas, good to see you here. Andreas says, hi Steven, how was the trip? The trip was beautiful, man. Just absolutely stunning. You know, the Appalachia mountain region is just incredible. We traveled through Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, New Jersey, New York, Maryland, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. So we hit a lot of states. But, you know, getting into New York through Pennsylvania, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. There's mountains everywhere just covered with trees going in. And we went over the Hudson River. We went over the Hudson Bridge. The one and only toll bridge. So I'm so used to Illinois having just toll roads and you have to pay almost $10-20 to get through it, a tollway. With this, it was just the Hudson Bridge for $2.10, and that's it. And it saved 2 hours of travel. And that was on the way there. On the way back, we went over the George Washington Bridge, and that's a double-decker bridge. I think the top portion is toll, and the bottom portion is non-toll. And we went through the non-toll portion. It reminded me of the Loop here in Chicago. Like, you know, you have like Lower Wacker Drive and all that. That's what it looked like to me. But it was a very nice trip. We ended up going... Oh, we went to Maryland as well. We visited Sharpsburg and visited the Antietam battlefield, where the most violent day, the highest single day tally of the Civil War took place at Antietam. Close to 30,000 lives lost in a single day. It's the most bloody battlefield, single day battle that's ever happened. It was, what, September 17th? I want to say... I can't recall the year. I don't want to get it wrong. But it was on September 17th in the 1860s. Several months before Fredericksburg, I believe. And I could be wrong about that. But General Burnside was there. The 114th Pennsylvania was there. One of the units that I reenact. So I brought my entire uniform for that unit. And took some photographs at Miller's Cornfield, where 114th Pennsylvania fell in with the 2nd Massachusetts. And then we also took a look at Burnside's Bridge, where there was a heavy confrontation over there. There's many memorials to Ohio units and New York units. And we just saw a tiny slice of that battlefield. There's so many memorials there. I like to say memorials because that's what these structures are that are built up. It's to memorialize these soldiers and the lives that they put on the line to fight this war. It was an unnecessary war. Absolutely unnecessary. And I have more to talk about with that, but that'll be for another time. I'm not happy with the outside influence on our country, and never again. Absolutely never again. We cannot have another 4 or 5 year war where the government tells us, yeah, 2 weeks and it'll be over. No, it lasted over 4 years. Never again. Never again, brother versus brother. We need to stay a united country. It's just unnecessary deaths. We cannot have that again. I'm an advocate for anti-war. There's no point in doing that on our own soil ever again. I don't think we could survive a second world war or a second civil war. Mind you, a third world war, but a second civil war cannot happen. There's just too much unnecessary deaths. I cannot express that enough. It's just the brutality of it. It's just... So I went there to pay my respects, and I'm very glad that my uncle joined me on that journey. It was very far. We drove over 2,300 miles, and I'd do it again, but the next trip we take needs to be much shorter, because this was a long one, but it was well worth it. Oh, Andreas, yes. We also visited Salem. We stopped there for about an hour. I got photographs I'll share on Abe's channel on Spiritual Encrypted Encounters. And I think I did a short video. But we went into the main portion of town. I took photographs of this giant, like, brass statue of a witch they have in the center of, like, the road on a roundabout. And it's right across the street from the Witch Museum, which was, it's like an amusement park, how long the line was there. But it was raining the day we were there. We had the hurricane rain, after effect rain coming in from Hurricane Jerry all along the East Coast. It was terrible driving out from Massachusetts back into, well, we went all the way to West Virginia, so we had to cut through New York and New Jersey. It was terrible conditions. And Connecticut, we also went to Connecticut. We had to drive through Connecticut, and I'd advise anybody to take any other route at night. Do not go on the Connecticut Turnpike, especially while it's raining. It's a 2-lane highway, like one way 2-lane and another way 2-lane, so 4 lanes total. But there's a median in the middle that has fully grown trees hanging over the turnpike. And on each side of the turnpike, you have rock walls. Just over 100 feet up. So you're like in a little tunnel without a top over it. And God forbid anybody gets into an accident on that. That's going to cause over 100 car pileup if that's the case. people going 70 to 90 miles an hour on this thing. And every 30 to 60 miles, you have a gas station kind of carved into the side of the mountains there where you can just pull in really fast, fuel up, maybe go take a bathroom break. But other than that, it's insane. I do not recommend anybody to go on the Connecticut Turnpike. That thing is dangerous. If you're not an experienced driver, do not drive there, especially when it's raining. And we had constant, like, drizzle. I call it piss rain, because, like, just, it's annoying. It's all little sprinkles and shit, and you have to constantly have the wipers going. All these elements just feed into it. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. But we made it through. We got to West Virginia, to our hotel, which was 10 minutes away from Antietam, about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was rough. But we did get some sleep that night, and we had a good breakfast in the morning, and then we made our way out to the Antietam battlefield. The visitor center was closed because of the government lockdown, which I still don't understand why national parks would be closed during a government shutdown, but they are. But the driving tour was all open. All the gates that were closing roads, those were open still. So basically, you got a chance to walk around the national parks, but you just can't go to the visitor centers because I guess they have government employees that are forced to stay home because it's the government shut down. Like, what are you gonna do? So even though I wanted to get like little trinkets or like, I collect coins, I collect little figures and stuff at these different battlefields. I wish I could have gotten one when we went, but I guess I'm just gonna have to go back again because we barely scratched the surface over there. I could see people, if you want to really see everything at Antietam, you'd have to spend at the minimum 2 weeks there to see everything, to soak in everything. And in a more broader sense, I think you'd have to spend 2 months there to see everything. And I was telling my buddy Jeremy the other night that he's the guy that is on the show with me for Madness Hour on this channel. Jeremy's also a fellow Civil War reenactor of mine. But I told him, like, yeah, the 2 months thing with Antietam, but if you want to see everything at Gettysburg in Pennsylvania, you have to go live there for, like, you have to be there for years to see everything in Gettysburg. Just the sheer amount of memorials that are there. It's gigantic. And the visitor center for Gettysburg, it is quite a large building. I don't know what you'd compare it to. It's almost like a stadium, like a football stadium. That's how big Gettysburg Visitor Center is. And then Antietam is more like a gas station quickie mart. Like, that's the comparable size with Antietam. But the doors were closed. I was in my full uniform. I talked to some other visitors there. They were curious what I was wearing, so I explained to them. And I got photographs. My uncle took photographs of me in my uniform at the cornfield and at Burnside's Bridge. But it was a good trip overall. And after that, we stopped in Delaware, Ohio for the night, which turned out to be the best hotel that we stayed at. And after that, we came back home to Illinois. So Andreas says, man, I can agree with you on that. We need to deal with our own crap on our own and not let an outside influence affect us. Yeah. And Andreas also said, oh, dude, that kind of sucks. Good. You made it to destination and back home safely. Yeah, that was my most, that was my top priority. And let me tell you, I was praying the whole way on the Connecticut Turnpike. I was praying in my head. I was praying out loud. I was asking Heavenly Father Creator to protect us and get us there safely without incident. And thankfully, that was the case. So, all glory to Heavenly Father Creator. I cannot believe how dangerous the Connecticut Turnpike was. But, I guess you have to experience it to know the level of danger that's there. So if you're ever passing through Connecticut, I'd recommend going during the day and not after sunset. Because especially while it's raining, it's very difficult to see on that thing. And hundreds of miles, man. I don't mind the driving, but that was ridiculous. Alright, let's get back to the book here. We got about 10 pages left. And we're only an hour in, which is good. So I think we'll hit the 2-hour mark. But thanks for being here, Andres. And I see someone else is here quietly watching. It's alright. I really appreciate you guys being here, spending time with me. And I'll probably go over more on Sunday about my trip and everything. But I had a good time with my uncle. We watched pro wrestling in Lowell, Massachusetts. Got to see the official send-off of the Dudley Boys. They wrestled the Hardys. And it was a good match. It should have been the main event, but it wasn't. The main event was, I believe, Trick Williams versus Santana. And Santana's our guy. So, there was a lot of people that left after the Dudleys match. But it was also the highest attended Songus Center event for the University of Massachusetts. It was the highest attended event ever in that building. So, historical in many ways. And I like to say that I was there for a lot of these things. I never had the chance like I do now when I was growing up watching pro wrestling. But now that I'm older, I get the chance to experience that, and spend my own money, and enjoy it with my uncle who got me into it in the first place. And it's just a good bonding time with family. So I appreciated the trip, and I thank Heavenly Father Creator for getting us home, getting us there safely, and getting us home safely. I also got to try with my uncle. We got a seafood chowder and clam chowder. We got 2 different chowders. Man, did that seafood chowder taste amazing. It was a combination. It had swordfish in it. Tasted delicious. And the clam chowder, I've been wanting that the past 5 years. Nearly 6 years I've been wanting to get New Hampshire clam chowder, and I got it finally this past weekend. So I'm happy with that. And we brought home some hot sauce that I'll get to enjoy for quite a while. And we got to eat from the Chowder Factory. It was like the number 2 best chowder location in the area. So I'm glad that we got to experience that. Alright, let's continue on here. But actually, you know what? I need to take a bathroom break. So I will be right back. And then we will finish up this chapter. So just hang tight here. And I will be back shortly. Alright, we are back. Let's finish this chapter now. But yeah, I'll talk a little bit about this again on Sunday, my trip. But I'm really happy I took it. It was a little outside of my comfort zone. And you gotta do things that make you uncomfortable sometimes. Helps you grow, you know? Alright, so back to the book here. We're on page 237. We got a map here. It says, diamonds mark the areas where electronic fogs, electromagnetic aberrations, and unexplained turbulence most frequently strike. The most spectacular and frequent disappearances also happen around here. Are high-grade uranium deposits below the seabed, or areas of magnetic vortices attracting charged particles? So the diamonds mark where electronic fog's at. We have this map here. As you can see, there is Florida. Got quite a few electromagnetic fogs. Over there. Looks like we got one. Where is that? It's like right in the Hudson Bay. Or right off the Hudson Bay. There. Then we have the Bermuda rise, and you see in between there's two more that has electronic fog. Or electromagnetic aberrations. Most recently, this befell a Cherokee Lance on July 20th, 2002, when it suddenly plunged from radar 15 miles from Freeport, Grand Bahama, killing all 5 aboard. 1 year before, in exactly the same spot, a Cessna 172's engine suddenly faltered and died, and the pilot was forced to ditch. Numerous incidents have occurred around Bimini. On April 26, 2001, an aerospatial en route from Great Exuma, Bahamas, to Miami flew into a cloud, quote, that was not depicted on the weather avoidance radar, end quote, and encountered severe turbulence within, the jamming of its autopilot, and caused a severe injury to one person. An extraordinary coincidence with the, quote, electronic fogs, end quote, and electrodynamics mentioned above. In this same area, the cruise ship Sovereign of the Seas lost all electrical power in December 2000 while en route back from the Bahamas to Cape Canaveral. She was eventually able to limp to Fort Lauderdale. The Dolphin, another cruise ship, lost power in this same area back in 1982 between Bimini and Florida, and ended up breached at Fort Lauderdale. The passengers were not amused, nor were the beachfront homeowners who opened up their drapes that morning to find their ocean view blocked by a large liner. Considering all of this, one should wonder why the windless calm of the Sargasso Sea may also be subject to electrical power loss. The explanation may be because it has no strong winds to deflect any of these particles, and they descend in an ionizing blanket. The sudden loss of power to steamships continue to happen more often within this area than anywhere else. Scrutiny of Lloyd's database, or database, I'm trying to say data. That's the correct way to say it. Scrutiny of Lloyd's database, searching for the files containing, quote, Bermuda, end quote, reveals that about 80% of vessels that pull into her port unexpectedly do so, reporting engine trouble or generator failures. In some cases, this has been so severe that they are able to only signal, quote, dead in the water, end quote, in time to receive help and a tote into port. Searches under port names like Dakar, Cape Town, Brisbane, etc. reveal that a far greater incident of diverted course is due to water ingress and fire. Ironically, our own technological progress may be an unexplained accomplice to the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. According to the report of the panel of leading scientists commissioned by the European Space Agency, issued January 2nd, 2001, quote, with the increasing use of microelectronics of ever-diminishing feature size, systems are becoming increasingly susceptible to single-event effects, or SEE, arising from the highly ionizing interactions of individual cosmic rays and solar particles, end quote. It further states, quote, while the Earth's atmosphere shields out most of the primary cosmic rays at conventional... sorry about that. Quote, while the Earth's atmosphere shields out most of the primary cosmic rays at conventional altitudes, parentheses 30,000 to 40,000 feet, and parentheses, there is a buildup of secondary particles, parentheses neutrons, mesons, and electrons, end quote, which reach a maximum at around 60,000 feet and are only a factor of 3 diminished at 30,000 feet. By sea level, there is a further factor, 300, diminution. This word spelled D-I-M-I-N-U-T-I-O-N. As a result of this mechanism, the radiation hazard at aircraft altitudes is as severe as in certain low Earth orbits. During the past 10 years, there has been increasing evidence of single effect events on aircraft electronics as well as in sea level systems, end quote. Perhaps the deadly potential of the increasing ionization of the atmosphere, in parentheses, a result of the weakening magnetic field, question mark, end parentheses, on aircrafts or ships, was best illustrated when the Space Shuttle Columbia blew apart on re-entry February 1st, 2003. Again, we're just reading this book. We're not agreeing with everything it's saying, okay? I've seen all of this stuff about these astronauts still being alive and under different names. Carrying on, like they didn't die, or they have a bunch of doppelgangers, and it's just a mysterious coincidence that they share the same names. I'm not buying that. It is believed the missing tile, in parentheses, damaged on takeoff, end parentheses, allowed the hot ionized plasma from the friction of re-entry to enter the hull and cause the explosion. It was only after this that NASA considered it time to pursue alternative propulsion systems, which will no doubt entail something electromagnetic, using a force that can repel the charged particles responsible for ionization. As early as 1992, Dr. Paul LaViolette informed NASA in detail about T.T. Brown's electrostatic engineering and the benefits of an electrostatic charge on the leading edge of a wing in reducing the heat of drag and friction. Studies that even Northrop have duplicated in its wind tunnels. The result of lack of interest was tragic on February 1st, 2003. Although the atmospheric ionization may be more deadly in the triangle because it is more humid or over the ocean, another possibility magnetohydrodynamics, although very speculative, may nevertheless solve some of the puzzles. So we have another diagram here. It says the great currents of the world and the large seas they interlock. All energy is at a level of vortex kinesis. The planet rotates in response, but this rotation in turn causes other masses, like the oceans, to swirl, and this might interfere with the primary energy fields. If we could paint a picture of the upper atmosphere, would it look any different? So let's take a look at this thing. So you have the different swirls here. And I know you can't really read this. I apologize. We got the North Pacific Current. We have the Pacific South Equilateral Current. Or Equatorial Current. My bad. We got the West Wind Drift. So there's all that. And they're just saying it probably is similar up in the atmosphere. Alright, carrying on. The existence of whether there are great currents in the upper atmosphere beyond even the range of the jet stream is largely a mystery. And if they are there, what drives them and the jet stream? And do they follow predetermined pathways like the currents of the sea? There are theories that either upper atmosphere currents may be partially driven by charged solar particles, of which they are constantly in contact, or that pre-existing currents from rotation may usher charged particles. Either may help explain how certain parts of the Earth can become more, quote, electrified, end quote, than others. As in the case of the currents of the oceans, there may be places where the upper atmosphere currents collide, spin off, and possibly in the process direct charged particles lower to Earth, where they may, at certain times of the year, make the atmosphere more electrically conductive. For anyone who has lived in the Triangle or other tropical areas between 20 to 30 degrees north latitude in the winter months, there is no denying that there seems to be a greater electrical potential, providing more static electrical shocks than at other times. One can wonder if this may amount for the Triangle's notorious Christmas time hex, a term coined because many of the strangest disappearances seem to happen between November and early February. So we're learning new terms here. Aside from providing an approachable explanation for many of the electromagnetic anomalies reported in the Triangle, can the possible hyperconductivity of the Triangle's atmosphere at varying times of the year also provide the genesis to give body to some of the more esoteric theories to explain the disappearances? One wonders what sort of bizarre chain reaction could be set in motion, considering that electromagnetism is the energy that is at the heart of all matter. Bizarre donut-shaped clouds and vortex kinesis high in the atmosphere can be explained by charged particles ionizing the air, but something is bringing them down and concentrating them. Perhaps it is radon, perhaps magnetic anomalies, perhaps magnetic vortices. The result could be electronic drains, swirling fogs, time discrepancies, and unusual and sudden winds, or no winds at all. But electromagnetism seems to need the ocean in order to speak the loudest. This is evident in the study of a science that may very well explain much about the triangle's peculiar electromagnetic anomalies. The science, little known in the West as yet, is hydridids. Hydridids. I can't say it. It's spelled Hydrides. Hydrid. I can't do it. I can't pronounce it today. I'm sorry. I'll show you how it looks. Where are ya? Right here. Hydrides? Who knows? Come on. Doesn't want to focus. There we go. Hydrides. I can't say it. Damn it. Whatever. Let's continue on. This science, little known in the West as yet, is hydrid. I can't do it. Why is it so difficult? Hydrides. That's all I'm gonna. That's it. And an expanding mantle. In his exhaustive book, Hydridic Earth, in parentheses, the result of 30 years of research. Russian geologist, and that's end quote, or end parentheses. Russian geologist Vladimir N. Larin describes a hydride in detail. So let's write the name of his book down. I don't know why this term is escaping me right now. Perhaps it's the long day. I don't want to blame it on that, though. What it amounts to is an unstable hybrid metal that had scores of hydrogen nuclei driven into the electron orbits of its atoms at some ancient time. Over time, these heavy metals have been brought to the surface of the seabed with saline and other processes. It oozes out along favorable areas, such as where continental shelves drop off to the abyss ocean depths, of which much of the triangle is composed, allowing the hydrogen to, quote, degas, end quote. In his section, Geophysical Peculiarities of Oceans, a familiar phenomenon to the reader of this book stands out as pinpointing such locations. And here's the excerpt. Other interesting geophysical data include peculiar magnetic field anomalies at Atlantic-type transitions from continents to the oceans. Some workers, in parentheses, Bennett and Lilly, 1971, end parentheses, attribute these anomalies to conductive mantle material ascending from the ocean side upward in scarp-like sutures. Our scenario interprets a scarp bordering the silicate buffer in the mantle along the continent ocean margin. Then, with jet-like streams of inflowing hydrogen, uneven silification results. Just give me one moment here. This scenario should leave blocks of unoxidized or incompletely oxidized intermetallic compounds. The presence of the highly conductive admixture in the silicate buffer explains the high electrical conductivity of the newly formed mantle layer and may be the cause of the coastal geomagnetic anomalies. That's the end of the excerpt. One must remember that the triangle's magnetic anomalies predominate along its continental shelf area, the deep Puerto Rico Trench, the tongue of the ocean, and other sharp submarine cliffs and plateaus like the Great and Little Bahama Bank. All these in the lee of the great North American continent's catastrophic slide over the unstable Atlantic seabed. Perhaps another memory of ancient catastrophe unique once again to Atlantica. We must not only consider the potential interplay of the oceans as a key element for creating unusual phenomena, but also for creating many sudden, volatile weather patterns that can spell disaster. That can spell disaster to boats and planes. In the words of Scott Steiner. It spells disaster for you. Destroying them quickly and then scattering the debris, thereby causing them to effectively disappear. We must remember that in no other place in the world are land and sea so thinly, so disharmoniously divided. Very often, hundreds of square miles of the Bahama Banks are only a few fathoms below the surface and are constantly being scoured by swift currents. The deep and fast Gulf Stream sends currents along the sides of the banks. The changes in ocean temperatures are drastic and frequent as colder currents sweep over shallow and warm water banks, and as cold and warm waters collide in swift frictional currents and eddies. The oceans of the world are always in motion, but the unpredictability of this movement is more true in the triangle than anywhere else. I'm going to take a brief break. Dr. Hans Graber of the University of Miami, extension on Key Biscayne, is the world's foremost authority on rogue waves. Quote, rogue wave, end quote, is rather self-explanatory. It doesn't travel with the pack, it is volatile, and its actions are unpredictable. Dr. Graber's studies have led him to be able to predict where rogue waves are most likely to strike. Isn't there a band named that as well? I'm pretty sure there is. Among the most probable areas are those near strong currents, like the Gulf Stream, and on the leeward side of islands, of which the Bermuda Triangle can boast thousands. In parentheses, the Bahamas alone consist of 700 islands, end quote. Or, this parentheses. Parentheses, the Bahamas alone consist of 700 islands, end parentheses. As an example of the volatility of rogue waves, he notes that in 1994, a huge rogue wave slammed into Daytona Beach, Florida, on what was an otherwise calm and perfect day weather-wise. Another example involved the Bahamian cruise ship Europa, which was slammed abeam by a rogue wave in November 1999. These rogue waves have been noted to attain heights of more than 100 feet, as seen aboard the Dutch passenger liner Rotterdam, which was hit by one in 1977. Eddies of the Gulf Stream. Oh, shoot. I got water on my book. It's my book, though, right? I try to not make this happen. It does from time to time, though. Adds character to the book, right? It's not like I'm going to sell this anytime. These books are in my personal library. So everything I'm reading, I own it. Like, I don't rent these books out. I own all of this material. Eddies of the Gulf Stream are not so noticeable, but their swirling, contrary, quartering, and cross currents can take any boater unawares. From aerial survey, these appear as vast swirling vortices along the edge of the fast current of the Gulf Stream. They look like larger versions of the familiar eddies in the shallows of riverbanks, where the fast currents bounce along the slower waters of the banks and take on a rumbling or swirling motion. A skipper on the ocean, unaware he is entering an eddy, especially at higher speeds, could suddenly encounter waves from unexpected directions and founder. Among the possible causes of missing boats is the North Wall phenomenon. So that's a whole thing too. A potent threat to boats in the northern waters of the Bermuda Triangle, off the Virginia Capes and north of Bermuda. The U.S. Coast Guard describes it as follows. And I'll read this excerpt and then I'll check the chat here. Quote. Well, this is all an excerpt, so there's no quote. Sorry. The North Wall phenomenon is one of rapidly increasing wind and seas in the area of the northern boundary of the Gulf Stream, where the sea surface temperatures can change dramatically. In such a region of large surface temperature contrast, a potential for damaging and volatile weather frequently exists. When cold air flows over this narrow zone of warm water, the air is rapidly warmed and rises. The rising air displaces the heavier, colder air aloft, which descends, generating strong, gusty winds at the surface. End quote. All right, let's read the chat here. Andreas says, it's amazing the amount of factors you have to take into account when you fly or use a boat over a sea to do it safely, and we still get screwed some of the time. Add the extra factors of the unknown. We are completely out of our league. Yeah, I agree, Andres. The sea's a different monster completely. I wouldn't want to be stuck on a boat in the middle of the ocean at night. That's just... You're just asking for trouble. So I give all the respect to all the sailors out there who's going across the oceans from... I don't know. What are you, out there weeks at a time? But someone has to do it. It's like the large fishing vessels doing that. Like, imagine just being out there at night. Have you seen these videos where, like... I've seen a few. I don't know if they're even... Like, some of these might be made up. But there are accounts of, like, especially in this book we're reading from, accounts of sailors hearing voices coming from the waters, asking them to jump in and join them. Where's that coming from? These guys aren't just hearing voices in their heads. They're not Randy Orton. Like, they're hearing this stuff. It's coming from the water. It's coming up, and it's trying to get them to unalive themselves, I think. It's like, we have no idea of the amount of creatures that are in the ocean. Some of these ones, for all we know, they eat us. And one of their things to lure us, their prey, is to speak to us like it's like they're us. Like it's another human. I know that there's some of them that try to pretend like they're women that are stranded in the ocean. God help me, please help. It's some weird shit. You have to really, like, know your bearings and tell the difference between these things that are trying to lure you into the ocean versus someone that's actually asking for help. Like, ask them to tell them their name. Or tell you their name. Andreas says, I've seen a few lives of sailors on TikTok and videos on Sea and Weird. And they get that on video. Crazy stuff to see and hear, no doubt. Yeah, I agree, Andreas. It's, there's so many unexplainable things about our seas. And, you know, maybe we'll find some answers here in this deep dive series, but all I see is this creating a whole bunch of more questions about what's really going on. But we're here to seek out the truth. Somewhere in between here, right? That's why we're here. We're here to learn. We're here to find answers to some of these things. Alright, we're on page 243. We're going to page 238. So we should end a little under 2 hours today. We're at an hour and 35 minutes soon. But let's continue. This is not only pertinent for boat losses, as in the case of the Miss Charlotte II in 1998, but also for aircraft. This area is where many of the well-known aircraft disappearances have taken place. In parentheses, at least they were on courses that called for them to pass here. End parentheses. This could explain some of the reports of unexplained turbulence over the triangle that do not qualify as regular clear air turbulence, or CAT. But the explanation would apply to this northern area only, since it is the area of most appreciable contrast in the warm and cold fronts of the Atlantic. It would not apply, however, in other areas of the triangle, as over the Bahamas or in the Sargasso Sea, where the variables are not so drastic. CATs are not the completely mysterious entities they once were. And again, this is clear air turbulence. They are expected in areas near the high altitude jet stream, where its fast current bounces along the slower currents and creates eddies, as in the analogy of the riverbank. They can also precede a storm because the atmosphere is being pushed before its building an oncoming mass. These types of turbulence would also have an oscillating motion, since the air is moving laterally like wave troughs of the sea. For low-flying aircraft, however, there would be little chance of encountering any significant CATs, especially while coming in for a landing. On the other hand, von Karman's vortices might apply. Again, another new term here. And the A's in Karman are accented. So Karman. Von Karman's vortices might apply. These swirling, choppy winds were first described by Dr. Theodor von Karman to exist at the lee side of an island or mountain. They are essentially created by the peak of a tall island diverting strong winds around it. Again, an analogy from a moving current of water might best elucidate it. Imagine the swirling downstream river current in the wake of a rock. For a landing aircraft, these can prove the most potentially upsetting because it is approaching at low speed as opposed to more open throttle when taking off. Not only can the unique shallows of the Bahama Banks cause a vessel to wreck, but paradoxically they can help hide its remains more than the depths. From the vantage point of living at one of the triangle's hot spots of Bimini, Bill Keefe, spelled Keefe, believes that the treacherous currents scouring the shallow banks, quote, would not let a boat or plane remain for long. After 2 or 3 days, they are broken up or swept away to deep water, end quote. These few days constitute a narrow window of time for locating a sunken boat or plane if it was not reported missing right away, and if its last position was not known with precision. Old pros consider many parts of the Bahama Banks as dangerous, and consider them especially hazardous for the neophyte sailor, and that's spelled Neophyte. Changes in the watercolor from light green to yellow to white are crucial, as they may be the only warning that critically shallow water or rocks and reefs are approaching. The water is so shallow in certain areas that even the shadow of a passing cloud can be trouble, hazing the distinctions between good water and bad, requiring a sailor to do lots of eyeballing. A neophyte, however, does not even know exactly what to eyeball and can wreck a boat suddenly and fatally, even where there are no rocks or reefs and where there is no land in sight. The banks can be shallow and deadly. Quote, sandbores, end quote, the colloquial expression for shifting underwater dunes, exist in the Bahamas where the water is only a fathom or a few fathoms deep, even miles from landfall. The temperamental currents etch these dunes into parallel ridges or complex maze-like patterns. The only navigable water is between them, measured here in terms of 1 or 2 fathoms, and then only temporarily. From the deck of a boat, the navigable channels are not always discernible, and skippers can suddenly find themselves trapped in a maze, yawing to try and follow the channels of clear water. Even the most experienced yachtsman can beach himself on these dunes as he tries to escape them. While one is often harmlessly and briefly detained until the current shifts the bore, one wonders if a boat could not be swallowed by the moving bores. Especially dangerous for a sailboat, with a deep keel being manipulated by the shifting sand. Another intriguing oddity of the continental shelves off the Bahamas and Florida is the large number of underwater funnels called blue holes. They are so dubbed because of their picturesque appearance as deep blue and bottomless holes in the nearby and often very turquoise shallows. Their depths taper into narrow bottoms that apparently continue to other blue holes many miles away or even to inland lakes. Changes in tides can bring about whirlpools in the holes, which on some occasions have swallowed small outboards. Divers have found some wedged in varying levels of the tunnels, but have never, of course, found any of the larger yachts, ships, or planes that have vanished in the Bermuda Triangle. So we have another map here. It says depth readings for the Great Bahama Bank in fathoms. In parentheses, 1 fathom equals 6 feet. And parentheses. The numbers indicate how treacherous the area can be for a boat. So let's just take a brief look at this. So this is just showing the different depths in terms of fathoms. We got like numbers in the 700s down here. It says in the tongue of the ocean. Got the Aruma Sound. So let me take a closer look at this. Yeah, it gets even deeper in the Exuma Sound. 2,664 fathoms. You multiply that number by 6, and that's how deep it is in feet. All right. I'm sorry that I don't have this in a more legible way. This is just too small to have it show up on the screen here. But you can see some of these are in the single digits. So not deep at all, and then extremely deep when we get down over here. And let's bust out the good old calculator here. So 2,664 fathoms is 15,984 feet. It's a long way down. Some have offered that invisible, quote, whirlpools, end quote, might be created by methane gas released from the sea bottom. The methane then rises to the surface in frothing funnels until it breaks the surface. Here, the water is proposed to be molecularly thinner and therefore not to be able to support a vessel sailing over it. The vessel would suddenly lose buoyancy and sink to the bottom, with no crew getting off and no lifeboat launched. In parentheses, or even if it were, it would sink as well. End parentheses. However, to truly upset any boat would require that enough gas seeps up through thousands of feet of sediment and then through thousands of feet of water. This is thought to be so rare as to happen no more than once every 400 years. It could not affect aircraft in any case. When an oil rig was drilled into a bed of methane. It did sink slowly, but news helicopters circling overhead recording the dramatic sight were unaffected. Cyclones, atmospheric versions of the whirlpool, strike with suddenness in the triangle and can destroy both planes and ships. At night they would naturally be completely invisible to a pilot who, not being aware he was dangerously near one, could not take evasive action until his plane began to shake violently with the swirling currents. In other words, when it would be too late for him to do anything. A boater might be able to hear a cyclone, even detect pelting spray, and perhaps even illuminate it with a searchlight. But all to no avail, since the boat would not be able to move quickly enough to escape it. Highs and lows, plus updrafts and downdrafts, can be more pronounced and drastic over the ocean, especially in the triangle because of its humidity and temperature changes. These can cause unexpected altitude changes and even vertigo for pilots taken unawares. In some cases, these updrafts and downdrafts can remove all the lift from an aircraft, essentially creating a pocket in which the plane drops so far that recovery is impossible. In parentheses, a 200-foot downdraft was forecast off St. Thomas the night Irving Rivers mysteriously vanished while coming in for a landing. The downdraft could have slapped him into the sea, although this wouldn't explain the absence of an ELT signal. End parentheses. The updrafts and downdrafts of rising storm clouds can cause an aircraft to crash by creating such a tailwind that the plane loses lift and falls to the earth or into the ocean. This is a possibility that one must keep in mind in a report of a missing plane that was diverted around storm clouds, although still on the perimeter. Underwater earthquakes can cause ships to vanish. Spiking waves have been recorded reaching 325 feet high, like off the western coast of Mexico on September 19th, 1985, after a devastating earthquake. According to the Mexican government, 2 merchant ships, 5 trawlers, and 24 small boats were missing in the Pacific off Acapulco after the earthquake. The ocean is not only a far greater part of this planet than the land, in parentheses 3/5 as opposed to 2/5, end parentheses, but its territory can be measured in cubic miles, which effectively triples its already vast domain. Moreover, unlike human beings and terrestrial animals, life in the ocean is not limited to the bottom of the hydrosphere, the sea bottom, as we are limited to the bottom of the atmosphere. In the last 2 centuries, the discovery of land animals previously unknown except in legends such as the Komodo dragon and the gorilla demonstrates what surprises may still await us in the ocean depths, which remain even more outside our view than Indonesian islands or African jungles. Sea serpent reports made throughout the world's oceans have described huge ichthyosaurs. I'm gonna spell this one. ICHTHYOSAURS, or lizard-like fish, in parentheses, resembling a museum-housed skeleton of an Elasmosaurus, end parentheses. And that word is spelled ELASMOSAURS, whose most famous representative in the world is a Nessie, like Loch Ness Monster in Scotland. Giant eels with hard scales, not unlike the fire-breathing leviathan described in the Septuagint. That's spelled Septuagint, have also been reported as at Gloucester, Massachusetts in August 1917. Funny how Massachusetts gets brought up the week I come back. I didn't plan that way. I did not plan it that way. Even though people making these reports have been condemned as, quote, losers, end quote, nuts, end quote, and, quote, cranks, end quote, the work of the late Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans, and that's spelled Heuvelmans, reinforces the reality of some sea serpent sightings, in parentheses, in the wake of sea serpents, end parentheses. So I guess that's another book, I guess. I'm curious. I'm going to look up exactly where Gloucester is. See how far away it was from me. Oh yeah, that's on the coast. I was only 49 minutes away, 47.7 miles away. In fact, let's see how close it is to Salem. Only 24 minutes from Salem. It's up northeast. Yeah. I'm sorry, I gotta take another quick break. I'll be right back. I drank so much caffeine today, it's incredible. Alright, I'll be right back, guys. Alright, I'm back. We're here for the last 2 pages. I really had to go to the bathroom. I'm sorry about that. It happens. I'm not AI. This is proof. Alright, let's finish up these last 2 pages. Any discussion of sea monsters cannot overlook the giant squid, in parentheses, Architeuthis dux, end parentheses. And I'll spell this. It's 2 words. Architeuthis and DUX. This, quote, sea monster, end quote, may be responsible for a wide range of reports of sea serpents when only its long and large tentacles were seen flapping about at the surface. Although it usually averages about 20 to 43 feet in length, the largest ever captured was 60 feet long and weighed 2,200 pounds, which opens the door to the possibility that there are even larger versions in the deep, since this squid is happiest at 13,000 foot depths. The ones we have had even fleeting glimpses of are most likely those that prefer the 700 to 3,000 foot depths. Its territorial range is well within the Triangle, the North Atlantic, and the Gulf Stream, which it might use seasonally to migrate north. A U.S. Navy frigate, in parentheses, USS Stein, 1985, end parentheses, out of San Diego, suddenly had to turn back to port when her sonar went on the blink. Examination of the rubber sheath that cocoons the bubble, quote unquote, containing the sonar showed it was ripped and shredded, and found still embedded in it were several strange claws or teeth resembling the small teeth or claws of octopi, but by their size indicating a significantly larger species. Recent reports of encounters with which appears to be a very large shark must be taken seriously. The length of this shark is roughly estimated by the size of its dorsal fin and by the distance from it to its tail fin trailing behind, all which suggests a shark similar to the great white, but of an enormous size comparable to that of Megalodon, a species of great white known to us today only by fossilized teeth, measuring more than 6 inches long. So we have a small diagram here. It says a man, a boat, a great white, and a megalodon. So let's take a look at that. And finally, even the behavior of known species beneath the sea is still the subject of an imperfect science. An incident befell the Dougal-Robertson family on June 15th, 1972, near the islands of Galapagos, while they were sailing around the world in their 43-foot sailboat, Lucette. Suddenly, 3 killer whales broke off from a pack of 20 and rammed their boat, sinking it in 60 seconds. Robertson was later able to write about this harrowing experience after he and his family survived 36 days at sea on a small life raft. That's incredible, by the way. Recalling his first thoughts after the Lucette sank, he expressed perhaps what all those lost in the Bermuda Triangle might also have briefly felt. Quote, I climbed wearily into the yellow inflatable, a sense of unreality floating through me, feeling sure that soon I would waken and find the dream gone. End quote. And with that also ends chapter 11. Amazing. So, for next week, we have the last chapter of this book. Chapter 12. A vast horizon, an answer from without, within, and all around us. And I already have that show scheduled to live stream for next week, so if you can find it in the upcoming shows, please give that a like. Please give this show a like as well. Next week's chapter is going to be a little shorter. It's pages 249 to 261. So we might get this in under an hour next week, if not within an hour and a half. And we just broke 2 hours here. We're at 2 hours and 4 minutes. I really thank all of you for being here. We're always learning new things as we go through this chapter by chapter. There's a few more books here to look into. A few new terms that we've learned. And I do condense these notes that I take. I took these notes for today. So it's a few book titles that were mentioned, a few terms and phenomenon that are named. Whew. Man, look at this. Look at this, by the way. We went through all of this so far. We read all of this page by page. And we just have the ending of the book left right here. Just check that out. We read most of this. So, if this is your first time watching this series, thank you for joining us here. And please go back and watch this whole thing, because we're covering stuff that's not really talked about in the mainstream. I mean, we got time slips. We got vertical fog, like cylinders just appearing. And then time distortions. We got vessels and boats that are missing all the time. Some that are never recovered. Large vessels that really shouldn't disappear the way that they do. But anyways, that's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you for being here. I do plan on doing a Sunday show if I am up for it. Really, I have a lot of signatures to collect, so worst case scenario, our next Let's Talk will be November 2nd. I hope not, because that's another 2 weeks from now, and we do have a lot to cover on Let's Talk About It. Got such a backlog of video to review. Man, like I have 3 or 4 different videos I want to look into on Let's Talk About It, so that's going to take a little while. We'll probably get through what I have planned by the end of November, just because there's so much content. I'm not going to do another 12-hour stream. It's just too long. And especially right now, while I'm trying to hit a deadline of like the 27th for some of these signatures, that cuts out a whole extra 4 days, 5 days. that I could be collecting signatures. But, you know, I'm going to try to hit my goal. And if I'm not here on Sunday, I will definitely be here on Tuesday for the next Coral Castle installment for our deep dive series. And that is going to start our new book in that series, Anti-Gravity and the World Grid. And that's a collection of works that's put together and edited by David Hatcher Childress. So he's an or I guess you could say he's an editor, but he's been featured on the History Channel a lot, and he's at these UFO conferences in Florida. So I don't know what he's up to these days, but he did do a lot of work in the 80s and 90s on electromagnetism and the world grid, procuring these different researchers and trying to come to a consensus as to what's going on with our world grid. And the world grid is a major factor in both the Coral Castle series and this Bermuda Triangle series. So we're trying to make sense of it all here by just sitting down and thoroughly going through everything, which that's what this channel is going to do. That's what I feel like doing here. But this will be it for today. I really appreciate y'all being here. And until the next one, class dismissed.